The East Baton Rouge Parish Library believes that a thriving business community is good for us all. That's why we help entrepreneurs start businesses with tools like Gale Business Builder. Keep commerce rolling by providing access to computers, printers, and free Wi-Fi at 14 branch locations. Get a library card. Grow your business at ebrpl.com/business.
Owning a business comes with pressure. There's a limit to what I can do and still keep employees engaged. Fortunately, there's Insperity. They expand my HR capabilities exponentially, helping me with hiring and training while offering my employees competitive benefit options. Since I can focus on other priorities, my staff can thrive and my business can grow. With Insperity, nothing seems impossible.
Good morning and welcome to Strictly Business. I'm your host, Penny Font. This webcast features conversations with Louisiana's most influential CEOs, entrepreneurs, and community leaders with the goal of providing insights, ideas, and inspiration to help you and your business grow. We want to keep Strictly Business as interactive as possible, so for those joining us live, here's an icebreaker question for you. Submit your vote in the comments, and the results will be posted at the end of the webcast. Strictly Business is brought to you by Insperity and the East Baton Rouge Parish Library. Without their support, this project would not be possible. This month, we talk with LSU coach Jay Johnson about building a dream team. He has a proven track record of postseason success, explosive lineups, and highly ranked recruiting classes that make him one of the best college baseball coaches in the nation. At the helm of one of the most storied college baseball programs for the past 3 seasons, Johnson has enhanced LSU's elite legacy by guiding the Tigers to the 2023 College World Series title, marking the 7th national championship in school history. In the 2024 season, he directed LSU to a berth in the championship game of the NCAA Chapel Hill Regional, and the LSU pitching staff led the nation in strikeouts with 733. He has developed 30 major leaguers during his collegiate coaching career, most recently right-hander Paul Skeens of the Pittsburgh Pirates, the starting pitcher for the National League in the 2024 MLB All-Star Game, and outfielder Dylan Cruz of the Washington Nationals, who made his MLB debut in August 2024. A total of 9 players were chosen in the 2024 MLB draft, including 8 pitchers, a mark that tied the SEC record for the most pitchers drafted in a single season. So he definitely knows a thing or two about building dream teams. Coach, welcome, and thank you for joining us this morning.
Awesome to be with you, Penny. Thank you for having me.
Let's start with a little bit of context. So what key experiences or influences have shaped you into a championship-winning coach?
Yeah, I was raised in a house of a very successful coach. My dad was an outstanding, football and track coach in high school at the high school level. So honestly, every day of my childhood was like waking up and going to a clinic in leadership, high expectation, all of those types of things. So that's really, where my foundation, began and was born.
Okay, I like that story. When you inherit a team, as when you first came to LSU, how do you quickly assess strengths and weaknesses and put the right pieces in place?
I think it's really important, and I'll be honest, I did a lot of that prior to accepting the job. And when you look at strengths, the baseball brand of LSU is as strong as anybody in the entire country, and we have Coach Skip Bertman to thank for that. And, in honesty, I told people all the time when I left Arizona, which was a great job, probably the best job in the country for me, definitely at the time, I was only leaving to come to LSU. It wasn't to come to the SEC or, a bigger payday or any of those types of things. It was because it was LSU. And so knowing we had a brand strength right away was a big deal. But before accepting the job, I kind of peeled back where was the program at right now and decided okay, there's a good enough foundation there to be able to go in and achieve success quickly at a place that has high expectations. That's really, really important. For example, knowing I would have a player like Dylan Cruz for the next 2 seasons, that was a big draw. Like that was a big immediate strength, of the program. There was also assessing, areas that the program needed to get better, in terms of we were going to immediately need to recruit, stronger pitching. And we were able to do that. And so I think 2 things happened. It allowed me to make a good, sound decision by coming here, which, I'm very thankful that I did make that decision. And then, hit the ground running, and get moving. And I think you have to always have your eyes open to what are your qualities and what are your deficiencies. And you want to lean into those qualities while continuing to build your deficiencies to build the best organization that you can.
Definitely some great insights for business there as well. In sports and in business, what are some key traits you look for in a player that signal they'll be successful in a competitive environment?
Yeah, that's a tough question in my world because we're often recruiting, 16, 17, 18-year-old, young males that are still developing, not just physically, but mentally. And the physical skills are often easy to see. Does a pitcher throw hard enough? Does he throw enough strikes? Does he throw enough good secondary pitches? Does a hitter have bat speed, running speed, arm speed? Those are easy to see if they stand out. I think knowing the person and the competitor that you're getting, or what maybe we as coaches would call that X factor thing, is completely the separator in whether they're going to be a great player or really positively contribute to the success of our team. And I think what I try to do is in the recruiting process, get to know and understand the person. What do they want out of this opportunity? What are they willing to contribute, to the team and to the program in this opportunity? In the limited opportunities we get to see them in stressful environments, how do they handle themselves? I often will go to previous coaches, almost like a reference check, that a business player, like, okay, when things are tough, how does this person, react and respond? And so I think you do your homework, but nobody's perfect, number one. And number two, that's the hardest thing, honestly, to probably pull out of an evaluation.
Very much so. How do you motivate high-performing athletes or team members like Dylan Cruz and Paul Skeens who are already at the top of their game, and what lessons can business leaders learn from this?
Yeah, I think, in talking about Dylan and Paul, I think that the most exciting thing I always get to share is those guys are as elite can be, and they're better people than they are baseball players. And I think a couple things that I've tried to do with my best players over the years, what happens with them is a lot of people want a lot of things from them, because of their talent, whether it's fans, pictures, autographs, family members want tickets. I've always tried to just be a really good support system for my best players. And I'm there for them, and I don't need any more from them other than them to just be themselves. And I think when you can do that, you can usually get, players like that to, really buy into what you're trying to accomplish as a team. And honestly, outside of them being the best players in the world, that's what made that particular team special, is because every other player on the team saw how their best players operated and conducted themselves. And that was the reason why that team was so special. And so I think, for me, it wasn't a lot of motivating them. They had a lot to gain. I think it was helping them just kind of stay focused on what's important right now. And I heard this the other day that, with you're trying to perform at an elite level, I think helping those two just focus on execution. Like, what did they need to execute and not worry about anybody else's expectations? And I thought that was really well said. And a lot of, honestly, what we tried to do with those guys, or I typically try to do with our better players.
I love that philosophy. A lot of great takeaways there. The 2023 season in particular showed the importance of team chemistry. So, how did you cultivate relationships between players, and how might this translate to building strong teams in business? And just another question to add to that, how do you manage the multitude of personalities and egos that we see in the workplace and on the field?
Yeah, there's a lot to that question. And, I just mentioned Dylan and Paul, and I think this is so important. If you can get your best players or your best employees or your most productive people in the organization on page with the organization's mission, then it's going to positively affect everybody else. And it's not, this thing where, as a young player or a young male, they all are conditioned in recruiting to kind of think about what's best for them and then themselves. And then we bring them into this team environment where I think a lot of coaches make mistakes of thinking everybody should just be a team player. Everybody should just be selfless. And what I've learned over time, and it's more important today than it's ever been, with the evolution of, self-acceptance is the most important thing that young people need. Social media, all of those things. We try to explain what being selfless is. And that's always, underline always, placing the needs of the team above your own. But the biggest mistake that I can make is expecting somebody to do that without showing them how to do that. And so that team in particular made a choice to a man to always place the needs of the team above their own.
Thank you for sharing that. What are some key traits that you look for in a player that signal to you they'll be successful in a competitive environment?
Yeah, I think first off, and I think this is relevant across, any form, is does the person actually have the skills necessary to execute the job that you need them to execute? And then we're not always going to get that. Even at LSU, we'll fight Major League Baseball where they'll sign one of our highly talented recruits to professional baseball and they won't even go to college. So we, even though we have an opportunity to recruit a lot of the best players, won't always get exactly what we're looking for, or the best of what we're looking for. So the next thing I do is there enough talent there, but in that player that's just a tick down, do they have this innate, burning desire to be the best at the job that I need them to do? And I think that's where you start somebody that becomes a real special or a real difference maker for your team. And I think, I really learned that, coming here to LSU, for how important, playing at LSU is to kids that have grown up in Louisiana and have dreamed of doing this. Cade Beloso really comes to mind. Gavin Dugas really comes to mind. And those guys were maybe that next tier down, great players, maybe not top flight, surefire major leaguers, but they had a burning desire to do whatever the team needed them to do. Now, the competitive environment part of it, I think that comes with experience, that comes with building confidence, and the more you can put players in difficult situations and coach them to success, and they start to have them in those competitive situations where something is really on the line, then they become better at it. And some are just, they naturally have that in them. And those guys are like gold, but, no different than building, a selfless attitude. I think we have to build competitiveness in the people in our teams and organizations.
Absolutely. So in business, we talk a lot about the challenge of finding good talent and recruiting good talent in a competitive market. So how do you approach talent acquisition in sports, and what parallels do you see with recruiting top talent in business?
I think that's a great question, and I think there are a ton of parallels. I think I break attracting talent into two areas. The first part is evaluating. And evaluating, as I kind of mentioned earlier, do they have the skills to compete at the level that we want to, which is the top of college baseball, compete to go to the College World Series. Do they have a chance to be a future professional baseball player? And so I won't get into that because there's a whole lot of layers if we're talking about pitchers, infielders, catchers, hitters, all of those types of things. But evaluating first and not letting kind of an emotional thing, get into that evaluation part of it. And then there's a recruiting part of it. And this is, I think, very relevant in business. And I learned this, basically recruiting is sales. And so whatever player we're trying to attract, if we've evaluated that they have a skill set that meets this criteria, is I try to find out what are the most important things to them. And no matter what they tell me, I align LSU as the best place to be able to do that. So for instance, I want to become a major league player someday. Man, I'm really glad to hear you say that, because we're about baseball here. We're about developing major league players. And if you look at LSU's, history or even current success of that with Alex Bregman, DJ LeMahieu, Aaron Nola, Kevin Gausman, Paul Skeens, Dylan Cruz, well, there's your example that can happen through this school. And I've been very fortunate, through coaching at the University of Nevada, University of Arizona, and LSU, to have a ton of major league players. And I'll say, matter of fact, I was watching TV last night and there were 3 games in a row and I literally kept changing the channel back and forth because one of my former players was playing in that game. And so you're always trying to connect, what the consumer or customer is looking for, if you will, or the person you're trying to attract to come be part of your company, that it is the best thing for them based on what you can help them accomplish, which is what they want to accomplish.
Good insights. How do you identify leadership potential among your players? And secondarily, how do you create an environment where every player feels empowered to lead, even if they aren't necessarily the captain?
It's a great question. It's one that I'm honestly working on, becoming better at. And I think I've fallen on a couple things in regards to leadership recently. Is a lot of people will talk about they're comfortable or more comfortable leading by example. And I've kind of come up with this thing where I go, time out. Leading by example is only doing what you're supposed to be doing. That's all leading by example is. So I started trying to take it, can every player, A, lead by example, do what you're supposed to do, and then B, can you take it one step further and can you positively influence everybody in our organization by what you say, by what you do? Everything that comes out of your mouth is going to influence us positively or negatively. Every decision you make, you basically do to the team. So can you be a guy that positively influences everybody by what you do and what you say with every decision that you make? Then you create this locker room where everybody's positively affecting each other. Then I think the last layer, and I mentioned, we were talking about, Paul Skeens and Dylan Cruz before, those guys had such a high standard of how good of players they were and how they operated. If you have a performer like that in a team, in business, you have to coach those along and really, really tap into that. And you have to be careful. You have to make sure they're capable of it. But if you have a high performer that does everything right, you have to utilize that player as a leader because their peers will absolutely respect what they say. Then what I talk about is trying to talk about for them how to do it. It's not throwing somebody up against the locker room and challenging them to a fight. That's not leadership. It might be, going over to Izzo's across the street from the stadium, buying them a burrito, sitting down, talking to them, getting to know them, and then talk about, okay, well, when you did this or you said this, what were you thinking about there? And get them cultivating thought, oh, wow, maybe this wasn't the best way to go. So I think it's kind of along those 3 layers and something I'm constantly trying to get better at, because when you have that exceptional player leadership, it lifts your team in a special way.
I love that. What role does accountability play in building a competitive team, and how do you ensure that without damaging morale?
Good question. And again, something as a leader, and I've been a college baseball coach now, I think we're going on year 25, coming up this year, that I'm constantly trying to get better at. I think one of my strengths as a leader, and this isn't for everybody, is I think I do a really good job not sweating the small stuff. And I think if you don't sweat the small stuff sometimes with your people in your organization, it creates a little more freer environment for the player to be themselves. And if they're more themselves, they're actually going to be more bought in to the team. Now, with accountability, you cannot run a high-level organization without holding people accountable to the standards of the organization. So I think identifying what is really important to hold them accountable to, that's really, really important. For instance, for us, if we're talking about team rules, or off the field behavior, it comes down to three things. Do what's right. Simple question. It's a yes or no. Is this the right thing to do? Yes or no. If you can get them to master answering that question of doing the right thing, then like the discipline issues that we have go way down. Number two, doing the best that you can. And for my guys or my players, that is simply helping them understand they can accomplish far more than they think that they can, and kind of raising the standard. And then by raising the standard, you're getting this increased level of intensity, of execution, of effort, and then a lot of positive things really have there. So you're moving away from these things that you need to hold them accountable for. And then the third thing is really just like treat others the way that you would like to be treated, basically like the golden rule. So then you're establishing this culture of humility. And then by doing those things, maybe we start to move to where we're what I call a low drama program. Like if we want to be a great program, we have to be a low drama program. If you want to have a successful business, you need to be a low drama business. And, there's a lot of people that do a great job of that. And certainly something I'm trying to get better at as we're sitting here today.
That's a great playbook for us. So we know that LSU fans can be a little bit passionate and a little bit opinionated. Your teams routinely face high expectations and fierce competition. So how do you maintain the team's focus amidst that external noise?
Yeah, I hadn't noticed that. Just kidding. I love our fans. I tell people all the time, I get asked a lot about this question and like kind of how do you deal with it? And, I look at it this way. The flip side of that is we have 13,000 people pour into our stadium for a college baseball game that love the Tigers and support us. And I wouldn't trade that for the world. And you can't have that type of support without there being some expectation, passion, and emotion on the other side, maybe when things aren't as good. So I don't worry about that at all. Like I just want them to keep showing up and keep making it a great home field environment. I think, in terms of managing expectations, I think it's really important with people that you're working with for them to understand what expectations are relevant and those that aren't. For us, what is relevant is we want to be undefeated at preparation. I never want to be out prepared by any of our opponents. So I want everything that they have. My expectation is they're giving everything that they have towards preparation. And then the other is a maximum effort to doing their job to execute to help the team win. Those are my expectations. So those are the ones that are relevant. The game of baseball, how we play, that's relevant. What anybody says about us on the outside, social media, a fan, a nasty email, it's not relevant. It has nothing to do with us performing our job. And so I accepted this job as a personal challenge to myself because what I just said, I believe in it at my core, and I think it's served me well here, and that's kind of how I go about, managing and handling that.
That's a very good take. I appreciate that. Let's talk about mentorship. What role does that play for you in developing younger players, and how do you think your approach to leadership applies to leadership in the business world?
Yeah, big believer in mentorship, and I'll use my own example as a coach. I mentioned my dad. The other opportunity I got right out of college, done playing, finished 5 years of college baseball, was hired as an assistant coach for $2,500 a year right away, and got a real opportunity to recruit, to coach, to make decisions during the game, coach third base, run the offense, make mistakes. And I would not be sitting where I am today without that opportunity that my college coach, Scott Sarver, gave me as a young coach. And then he's continued to mentor me. He'll come out here or come down to Louisiana before the season, watch us scrimmage for 3 or 4 days, and provide feedback for what he sees in the team. And that's a relationship that's still going to this day. And that's been very critical for me. I think with players, again, or maybe employees, peer relationships and peer accountability are really, really impactful. And, as we were kind of talking about leadership, or in this word, mentorship, when you have guys that are on your page, I think coaching them to the leadership or mentorship side, and then them using it to positively influence a team member, like that can just create this super positive ripple effect. And whether you're going into a locker room or to an office building every day, that synergy between your team is really important. And so I think there's a ton of parallels in regards to that.
Absolutely. What do you believe are the biggest mistakes leaders make when trying to build a competitive or high-performing team?
It's a really good question. I think there's a lot of them. I think probably the most important is, and I don't want this to sound corny at all, so I'll try to do my best with it, but focusing on why you're doing what you're doing. I think if it's to drive your own ego or your own success, you're going to fail. Because, in leadership, you're basically taking responsibility for a number of things that are actually out of your control. But you have to take responsibility for them. And if your ego is driving you, that's not going to work. Like that, it's just not going to work. But if the leadership is about how can I positively impact everybody that's in my organization, then I think you're on to something. My dad, I mentioned, took me to a coaching clinic when I was 12 years old. And Lou Holtz, the head coach for Notre Dame football, was giving the speech. And he said something that I never forgot. He's like, if you help enough people get what they want, you'll get anything in the world that you want. And that constitutes a goal. And that's something that's always stuck with me. And our organization, I want to win the national championship. Omaha is the best place in the world for me, to be at the end of the season. And I want it worse than anything in the world. But how we do that and how we get there really, really matters to me. The Major League Baseball draft is a big day. Seeing a major league or seeing one of your players ascend to the major leagues and achieve their lifelong dream, that is a big deal to me. And so I want to win, but how we win and helping the players get where they want to go is really, really important to me. And that's something that I'll hold with me as long as I continue to do this.
That's awesome. What has been your biggest leadership lesson learned as a coach at LSU?
I think kind of what I just said. I took the job as almost like a personal challenge to myself to stay convicted in what I believe in and kind of keep your head down and keep working. That over a long time I've built this process of winning that I like to talk about, and to stay true to that, like no matter the circumstance. And obviously we always have to evolve, adjust, pivot, but that's also part of that process. And I think staying true and committed to that and not letting those irrelevant things affect you, I'm very comfortable, in my own skin as a leader and doing that. And, at the end of the day, I answer to myself, answer to my own family, answer to our players, and focus on the opinions, that really, really matter. And if you're doing that, then you kind of have a way of staying in tune with what I was just talking about, of like you're in a position to help the players. And if I help the players and I do a good job helping the players, I trust that the winning and the success will take care of itself.
Well, we really do appreciate your leadership. As we close out, do you have any final thoughts for our audience of business leaders or a recommended read? Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I'm a baseball guy, so I'm much more of a math person than a reader. It's something I want to continue to get better at. I think more than anything of kind of what I said is, and there was this thought or concept of, focusing on why you do what you do. And I don't necessarily like saying it that way, but I've always thought about keeping the main thing. And that is staying committed and convicted to the things that you believe in that are going to help your company, your employees, and you be really, really successful. And then the other thing I would say is it's really important to be consistent. Like, I think we all get drawn to motivation. We always all want to be inspired, and there is definitely a place for that. But what I would want, the people around me to say is Coach showed up every single day. Like, he really showed up every single day. And I think the value of being a consistent leader, or a consistent employee over a long period of time, I think that's where you see, really, really good results.
Coach, so many insights and takeaways here today. Thank you so much for making the time to join us and share these with us. We appreciate it.
You got it. Thank you, Penny.
And thanks also to our viewers for tuning in, as well as our sponsors, Insperity and the East Baton Rouge Parish Library, for making this experience possible. Please join us again for the December 18th episode of Strictly Business. On behalf of our show's director, Tim Coles, and myself, enjoy and make your day a great one.